Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Emily Apchois, and I'm the chair of the Department of Music at Randolph College here in Lynchburg, Virginia. I'm also the director of our Guest Artist Series in Music, which brings musicians from around the country and the world to work with our students and perform for our community. I'm really excited to introduce this week's virtual guest artist, Andrew Finn Magill. He's a celebrated fiddler who performs in a wide range of styles from bluegrass and Appalachian folk to American jazz and Brazilian choro. He's been a Fulbright Fellow, a TEDx Scholar, and a recipient of a fellowship from the North Carolina Arts Council. His residency this week has included sessions with Lynchburg City School students and Randolph College students in the performing arts, and we conclude the residency with tonight's concert. Feel free to comment in the chat box, and we'll be happy to answer questions during the live Q&A session after the performance. And now, sit back, relax, and enjoy an evening of fiddle traditions from around the world with Andrew Finn Magill.
Hi, my name's Andrew Finn Magill, and I'm a fiddle player / violin player from Asheville, North Carolina, which is where I am right now. And I'm delighted that you're joining me from wherever you are, which I realize may or may not be Lynchburg, Virginia, because after all, this is a virtual concert, so theoretically you could be anywhere. But let me just start the program by addressing the Lynchburg community and thanking everyone in Lynchburg, Randolph College, and specifically Emily Apchois for asking me to do this virtual residency, this concert of which is a part of. So you're all welcome. I hope you enjoy what you're about to hear. So just a bit of a primer of what you're about to hear and see. And I mentioned the NC deliberately because you're going to see two of me. So there's the presenter version of me, this version, clearly, and then there's the musician version of me. And I've edited in between the two of us. Feels weird to refer to myself that way, just because it made more sense to be able to introduce the tunes. And then you're going to be hearing a lot of different kinds of music, some of which might conjure up more of a fiddle sound, or others you might associate more with the violin. Some of this music doesn't even have violin in it historically. And these are all ideas which I've been unpacking in the virtual residency, which was a thrill to be able to make materials for, especially for the students in the school system. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, that's fine. Just sit back, relax, and enjoy the music. So I'm going to start with a set of traditional Irish tunes, and I'm doing that because traditional Irish music was really my introduction to music itself. My parents are traditional Irish musicians. They were born in the States, but they've played traditional Irish music for decades, and that was literally all I heard as a kid, to the point that there was no Irish music, it was just music, because that's all we listened to. So I figured I'd start the program there, kind of where my musical journey began, and I'm going to play you three tunes, the first of which is called Munster Buttermilk. Munster Buttermilk, almost couldn't say it. It comes from the playing of John Blake, who's a wonderful flute player, among many other things, guitar, piano. I got this from his album, The Narrow Edge. And I'm going to follow it with a tune called Swingin' on the Gate, which was one of the first tunes that I actually ever learned. So it's kind of embarrassing. I had to hesitate to remember it, the name at least. Swingin' on the Gate, and I'll finish things off with Considine's Grove. So I hope you enjoy. All right, and we're back. I hope you enjoyed that. I'm going to continue along with two American tunes now. The first tune is a song. I'm not going to sing it, but it does have words. It's a song by the great Jean Ritchie, who was a mountain dulcimer player from Berea, Kentucky. And she moved to Greenwich Village, New York City in the 1960s. And she was a part of that whole crew with Bob Dylan and Joan Baez, and I guess the whole who's who of the 1960s folk revival, which was important actually because by doing that, she gave traditional Appalachian music a national platform and actually did a lot to popularize it overseas as well. So this particular song I first heard sung by John Doyle, who is a great Irish guitar player. Probably heard him first sing this when I was a teenager. The version you're about to hear is probably more based on a version by the Johnson Mountain Boys. And I'm going to go into a tune called Grassy Fiddle Blues, which I get from the playing of Kenny Baker. So Kenny Baker was the longest serving member of Bill Monroe and his Bluegrass Boys. And if you're even just the slightest bluegrass fan, you know that Bill Monroe is the father of bluegrass. Well, Kenny Baker in many ways is the father of bluegrass fiddle. So much of the way bluegrass fiddlers play, their phrasing, is based on Kenny's playing. So this is actually the title cut from his 1972 album of the same name, Grassy Fiddle Blues. I just love this tune, and I hope you enjoy these two. Okay, I'm going to play two jazz tunes for you now. Jazz is a very important part of my musical journey. When I was 14, I received a tape from a family friend, and on one side was Charlie Parker, the father of bebop, him and Dizzy Gillespie, I suppose. And on the other side was 5 or 6 cuts from the Hot Club de France, which was the kind of seminal French Gypsy Jazz group in Paris in the 1920s. And the fiddler on that tape was the great Stefan Grappelli. And I became enamored because I'd never heard fiddle in jazz before. I didn't know it was possible. And that kind of set me on a path, or sent me down a black hole, you could say. I'm sure if you talk to my wife, it sounds like a black hole when I'm practicing some of the things I practice, jazz-related scales and whatnot. But at any rate, I just completely fell in love with the music, but I also fell in love with the songs as well. And this first song comes from actually listening to Frank Sinatra, who was a musical hero of mine. It's called In the Wee Small Hours of the Morning, and it's a classic tune from the American Songbook. And I just loved his singing of this. So I'm going to start with a very violinistic, kind of schmaltzy, I mean that in the good way, version of In the Wee Small Hours of the Morning, and then go into All of Me, which is a tune written by Lester Young, the sax player in Count Basie's band. And All of Me is kind of the first tune you learn when you're studying jazz. It is like the tune. You can go anywhere in the world to a jazz session, they're going to know that tune. So I figured I might as well play it. So here we go. In the Wee Small Hours of the Morning and All of Me. Okay. So at some point when you study jazz, you have to study bossa nova because bossa nova is part of the jazz repertoire. And it's actually funny. I lived in Brazil for a few years, and I first went there in 2007, and I went back several times in between then and now, and even lived there. I actually married a Brazilian woman. And in Brazil, people think of bossa nova as jazz, whereas here they think of bossa nova as bossa nova, Brazilian music, something different. But as if to say, there are a lot of commonalities. And so I learned a few bossa novas, and I never really knew that much about Brazilian music. I just kind of treated them as jazz tunes until I got to Brazil. And wow, that blew my mind in so many ways. And I'm going to be playing some other Brazilian music later in the program, but I thought I would start the Brazilian portion of the evening with some bossa nova tunes, since that was my introduction to bossa nova. And I'm going to play 3 bossa novas by the father of bossa nova himself. There's a lot of fathers in tonight's presentation between Bill Monroe and Kenny Baker, and now Tom Jobim, or also known as Antônio Carlos Jobim. And in Brazil, he's just called Tom Jobim. So he wrote the music, and Vinícius de Moraes wrote the lyrics to pretty much, I would say, 90% of the classic bossa novas. So these are 3 of the classics. This is Triste, followed by Wave, and ending the set with literally the most recorded piece of music in musical history, The Girl from Ipanema. Hope you enjoy. Okay, this next piece of music I first discovered living in Brazil in 2014. I moved to Brazil in 2014 for many reasons, the biggest of which was a woman. I ended up marrying her, and now we live here in North Carolina. But while I was in Brazil, I really became passionate about Brazilian choro music, which is an instrumental genre. And I had a lot of tune books, still have them, in fact. And one day I came across this tune with a French title. So the name is L'Indifférence, Indifference. And I had never come across a Brazilian tune with a French title. And a friend told me later that Brazilian music, so the tune is actually French, and that Brazilian music, at least Brazilian choro, is based on French musette music, which made a lot more sense because the form of the music is very similar. There's three parts in both genres. The modulations tend to be similarly predictable between both forms of music. So I'm going to play this tune probably more in a, well, definitely more in a French style than a Brazilian one. And I'm going to start the tune by doing a little intro in a French Gypsy Jazz style, since that's a kind of music that I so associate with France and was forged in France, Gypsy Jazz actually, by that band that I mentioned at the beginning, the Hot Club de France with Stefan Grappelli and Django Reinhardt. So I'm going to do my best to channel Stefan Grappelli here, the 14-year-old version of me practicing all those licks in my basement, and then go into L'Indifférence. I hope you enjoy.
Thank you.
I'm going to play you two pieces of music which come from the Brazilian guitar repertoire. And since I first discovered Brazilian music, I've always been attracted to the guitar. I just think it's such a beautiful, virtuosic, lush instrument wherever it exists in Brazilian music, be it bossa nova, samba, choro, you name it. And I couldn't resist but arrange these two melodies for the violin, which is a bit ambitious. I'll just apologize to the guitarists watching right now, because in Brazil, oftentimes the 7-string guitar is the default guitar. And so to reduce these lush 7-string melodies and chords to 4 strings, I did my best, is all I'm going to say. So I chose two machishis, and a machixe is a rhythm, and it was also something of a musical genre in the early 20th century. So it was a precursor to samba, and it was actually one of the earliest forms of choro. Much of the early choro was written in the machixe rhythm. And the two machixes I'm going to play, the first one is called Graúna, and it was written by João Pernambuco. And the second one is called Tempo de Criança by Guilhermando Reis. And both of these are kind of pearls in the guitar repertoire that you can't not learn if you're studying Brazilian music. Just a pro tip if there's any Brazilian guitar students out there. Anyway, I hope you enjoy these two tunes. All right, I'm going to sing one for you now. This is a tune that I learned when I was probably 12 years old. My dad started something called the Swannanoa Gathering at Warren Wilson College in Asheville, North Carolina. It's the reason that I grew up here, in fact. This program has been around for 30 years, and it's a series of music workshops which focuses on passing on differing forms of acoustic musical traditions to the next generation. And those traditions could be everything from Celtic to Appalachian to Nordic. In fact, they are. There's different themed weeks around different genres. I started with Celtic music, as you might have guessed from the beginning of the show, but I quickly became infatuated with American music and other styles. And this particular tune I heard at the Old Time Week, Old Time Music and Dance Week, in a jam session with John Herman, who is a great, wonderful, not enough superlatives, nice things to say about the man, old-time musician. So it's a tune that is sometimes played pretty quickly, but I'm going to slow things down and sing for you a little bit. So here is Down in the Willow Garden. By the way, it's a murder ballad, and the lyrics are pretty grisly, so I'll just say, it's kind of a PG-13 song. Any parents watching with their kids, you've been advised. Having said that, hope you enjoy. by his old cabin door, wiping his tear-brimmed eyes. For his only son soon shall walk on yonder gallows nigh. My race is run beneath the sun, the gallows wait for me. For I didn't murder that poor little girl whose name is Rose Connolly. Yes, I did murder that poor little girl whose name is Rose Connolly. All right. If you've made it this far, congratulations, because this is the end of the show. Not quite, but this is going to be the last piece of the show. So thank you for sticking with me all this while. I hope you've enjoyed the music you've heard up until now. And I decided to close things out with a piece of music which comes a little bit more from this side of the world. I don't know if it comes from Virginia necessarily, but it's a standard in the traditional Appalachian repertoire. There are versions of this tune everywhere. There's actually a version of this tune in Irish music, or at least a tune by the same name, which is Speed the Plow. In old-time music, there are a lot of versions of this tune. Maybe one of the most famous is by a Kentucky fiddle player, so not kind of far from Virginia, a Kentucky fiddle player by the name of John Salyer, who was one of the titans of old-time fiddling in the 20th century. You can't not study John Salyer if you study old-time music. He's kind of like the Miles Davis for trumpet players, but for fiddle players in old-time music. So I didn't get my version from him. I got my version from Stephanie Coleman, a wonderful contemporary fiddle player. And I'll apologize right now for the camera shaking, which I know it's done on one or two other videos. This camera has a mind of its own, and it just decided to jostle loose. So if you have vertigo, I'm just warning you now. There's a little bit of camera shaking in this next video because, after all, it's a dance tune. It gets the blood flowing. I couldn't not tap my foot a little bit, and that just happened to be unbeknownst to me right when the camera had set loose. So if you do have vertigo, maybe just close your eyes and enjoy this, or close your eyes anyway. But at any rate, I hope you enjoyed the music. Thank you again for watching the concert, and thank you again to the whole Lynchburg community, and once more to Emily Yapchua for having me be part of this. Cheers. Have a great 2021.
Okay. Finn, thank you so much for that awesome performance. I really love how you gave our audience great background on all of the different pieces of music and the different styles and things. I really think that that gives them a lot of good, information about putting those styles in context and things like that. If you had to choose which of those pieces do you think is, I guess, most native to the violin, and what would you say, or the fiddle, I should say, and then what would you say is maybe the most far removed?
Well, it's funny because you changed your question there at the end. I was gonna say l'indifférence would be the most violinistic. I mean that French tune that I played is probably really an accordion tune, but because the violin is so synonymous with gypsy jazz, but that's an interesting genre because you kind of draw on both fiddle and violin sensibilities. But I mean, the last tune is probably the most fiddly of them all. Speed the Plow, comes from a fiddle player, John Salyer, and probably the least violinistic slash fiddleistic. I'm not sure what the terms here are. Would be, pretty much any of the Brazilian tunes that I played, because the violin is largely absent in Brazilian music, surprisingly. So I played some guitar tunes, and then I played some bossa nova tunes, and then. Well, maybe that was it, just those two selections. So, yeah, probably the Brazilian music.
For some of our younger listeners, because I know that there are some of our Lynchburg City School string students, if they, if I was in, say, the second grade and learning the violin, I would wonder to myself, what makes something violin versus fiddle? You've probably been asked that before. So what would you say to those students?
Well, if there's seven, I might give them a punchline to that because, that's usually a setup for millions of jokes. Um, of what is the difference between a violin and a fiddle? To me, they are different sensibilities. So, you know, um, players and based on those sensibilities, the players might do different things to their instrument, which I think is a source of some of the confusion. Some people might think that fiddles have a flatter bridge or the setup is differently. Um, well, the setup on a Baroque violin is also different than you know a, a, a violin you'd use for classical music, like post Baroque music. So it's the kind of the style which determines how you set it up, but the instrument itself is the same. So to me, they're different. They're just different sensibilities. The probably crudest definition I can give is that fiddle is groove based music.
Hmm.
That's kind of the way I think of it. So the aesthetic, the goal when you're playing fiddle music should always be to have a great groove, and just because it's often played for dances, so you need to have a great groove for the dancers to dance, and that kind of takes precedence over tone production and some of these other qualities that are pretty important in the violin school, I suppose. So yeah, that would be to me. I mean, we can unpack that more, but that's where I would draw the line is with the groove.
One of our alums who is a cello player has asked if we could hear some of those punch lines about violin versus fiddle.
Oh man, well the fiddle player. Let's see. Well, they're usually musician jokes. There's probably a lot more that I don't know about, but I think of things like a violin has strings, a fiddle has strangs. Yeah, I just silly stuff, silly stuff. I mean, put me on the spot here, but they're all true and they're all not true.
Right, right. Um, there's a question about where did you study music and what led you to Brazil, and did you intend to stay for those 2 years that you lived there?
Well, I'm self-taught, so I studied in my basement, pretty much. I took Suzuki for about a year, but I didn't really take to it because my parents both play traditional Irish music, and so that's all I heard in the house, and that's all I wanted to play. And it was kind of this battle with my Suzuki teacher to get me to practice the Suzuki stuff. Ironically, in the last 8 to 10 years, I've kind of come around back to classical music, but exclusively Bach. I just play him, and maybe I'll get into other composers one day too. You can't play everything though. So I have had a lot of mentors throughout my life, and I would take summer workshops at music camps, usually for only 1 week at a time. But all my study was ear training, basically, just learning tunes by ear, transcribing. I read music too, because I was in choir, and had to learn how to read the tenor. Well, at one point tenor, and then later the bass parts. And also because when I started to study jazz seriously, I needed to know about harmony and chord theory. What was the second question after where I
What
studied?
led you to Brazil, and did you intend to stay for 2 years?
Did not intend to stay for 2 years, but I went to Brazil in 2007 to study Portuguese, essentially. And well, studying Portuguese was part of a larger ethnography project, and I needed to learn Portuguese to be able to do these interviews with Brazilian musicians down there. And I've always been interested in languages. I probably studied 9 over my life, but that didn't mean I could speak any of them really. So at some point, it was in 2000, the end of 2013. I was working in New York City, and basically, I, on a single day, I decided to quit my job, and I bought a ticket to Brazil. Um,
Wow.
I didn't fly out the next day, but the day that I left the job, I had my ticket booked to Brazil the next day. So, and the reason was to continue learning Portuguese. And then once I got down there, I met a woman, and who I'm now married to, and actually have a little girl with, and she convinced me to move to Brazil. It wasn't hard to convince me, and I didn't have a job to go back to, so I was like, weather's pretty nice. Yeah, why not? And I didn't expect to start learning Brazilian music so intensely. I just figured since I was going to live down there, I might as well learn some of their local music. But the music was so hard. Uh, I love challenges. I just became obsessed with studying it and trying to learn as much as I could. So um, yeah, and I never expected to stay 2 years, but we've been back in the States now almost 4 years. And it's funny now that we've moved back to the States, Brazilian music has become an even bigger part of my life because in Brazil, I'm a gringo and people want to hear gringo music. They want to hear Irish or Appalachian. But now people are like, play some of that Brazilian music. So it's interesting.
So you're a regional expert, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, expert, well, subjective term, but thank you.
We have another question. Have you played any electric violin in any genre?
You know, not really. And I I really respect the people who do, but because my background is so acoustic, like I grew up playing traditional Irish music and old time and bluegrass. I mean, these are, in fact, some people draw the line, like for it to be bluegrass, it has to be acoustic. As soon as you throw in electric basses and drums and stuff, it's no longer bluegrass. So I just have such a strong acoustic background. It's historically been hard for me to embrace I mean, I love listening to electric instruments, but to play them, it's a whole other animal. Like I play guitar too, and even the electric guitar. I mean, that literally is like a different instrument, just the way you play. And the other thing about the electric violin, I have I have some friends who are professional electric violinists, and when they talk to me about their gear and like they have a rack this big of pedals, and it's not just. I mean, the reason you would want to play an electric is to be able to do all the effects and stuff. So it's not even just about playing the instrument well. You have to have such an intimate knowledge of the technology and like equalizers and delay pedals and all this stuff. And it's just, it's almost like learning another instrument. And so, there's only so many hours in the day. And I've just decided to focus more on acoustic music.
In a way, I think that's sort of similar to, people who say, oh, well, you play piano, maybe you could play keyboards in this band or something like that. But with keyboard, it's the same thing. The idea there is that you can utilize a lot of different sounds and effects and, you know, gather the electric aspect of it and what kinds of effects that has on the sound and things like that. And also kind of what you said about the difference in style if you could even call it dialect, I suppose, in a way, like how the instrument is used in context. They're very, very different things.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for music students of really any instrument for pursuing one's art?
That is great. That's a great question. It's a question I get a lot, and the answer changes every day because it seems like the music industry is changing every day. Um, there's a few things that I would say to that. I would say basically find a niche. That's the biggest thing. You can even find a few niches, but have a clear idea. Christian Howells, who's a great electric violinist, in fact, um, advised me to do this. Like literally write out what are your musical values. Your like a code of ethics, and then what are your musical goals based on that, and even a musical mission statement. And it's more important like this is such a cliche, but like the destination than the journey. So as long as you have a clear compass guiding you, what projects you accept, which bands you play with, which musicians you play with, that'll change over your life. But which things you say yes to will be determined by your musical mission statement and your musical values. So you just heard me say, I'm first and foremost an acoustic musician. So I was actually asked to sub a gig. I lived in New York City for a while, and it's really popular there. They have these weddings. Maybe this is still popular, where electric violinists will go out into the crowd and they'll play with the DJ. This is like a thing in New York, and you can make a crap ton of money doing it. Um, but so I have a friend who does that in New York, and he called me to sub for him once, and I was like, the money's really good, but like I don't think I can do this because I have to like first of all I have to like learn all these pop songs and it's not just even about that. It's like it's just a whole other animal. It's a electric violin gig for sure, and I know I could learn that. I mean, in context of a wedding, people are drunk, maybe no one cares. But but if it were like on a stage, a performance kind of thing, because of my musical mission, I just know that I'm more of an acoustic musician, and so those are the kinds of gigs that I say yes to, and that's just one example. But so have it. I mean, when you're young, it's actually great when you're young to think about this because I didn't really start thinking about this until the last 5 6 years. For most of my life, I've just played, you know, and so that's one thing I would say. And then the other thing is to learn. You don't have to become an expert, but learn like the bare minimum about the other aspects of the industry. If art is what you want to do, if music is what you want to do, learn a little bit about like publishing or like music publishing or be able to put yourself in the shoes of the other people in the industry you're working with. So if you're a booker, for example, I made this mistake a lot when I was booking my own gigs because I'm essentially my own booking agent, where I would make them an offer and not think about it from their perspective, And as soon as I did that, I would be like, I'm not going to hire this guy, because this is like he wants X amount of money, like this guarantee, and blah blah blah. He's never played in this town before. He doesn't have a following. You know what I mean? And so basically, just be able to put yourself in the shoes of everyone else you're going to be working with in that industry, and you'll be the one that knows that. I mean, who you're going to be working with, whether it's photographers or visual artists or booking agents, whoever it is. That's what I would say. Long answer.
It's interesting that you're touching on that because there's an element there where I think for young artists who are thinking about the future, most of the time they're thinking about their art. But
Mhm.
there's all of the other things that you have to think about. And we touched on this a little bit in the class with Randolph students the other
Right.
day, but about what you were saying about your vision, your mission statement, and then also all of the business details, all of the other kinds of things that you have to at least have some attention to if you're going to be successful. What
Yeah.
what kinds of what would you say were the most valuable lessons you learned along the way, besides what you were just referencing, talking about booking gigs from the booker's
Mhm.
perspective, and then like what other things would you say stand out for what you've learned in this process?
Um, well, let's see. I think your greatest asset as an independent artist is your mailing list, to be honest. Um, so, once you're like start now, like put a link up on your website if you have one, or create one if you don't have a website. Get people to sign up for your mailing list, and then if you are playing gigs, put out your mailing list at the end of every gig, because those are the people that really want to hear from you. The people on Facebook, if they see it at all, and odds are they won't because of the algorithms, but if they see it at all, it doesn't mean necessarily that they're going to be interested or they're going to click. But if they took the time to sign up for your mailing list, they're probably interested in what you do. And so I've been making a conscious effort of doing that for like 5-6 years, and I have about 1,200 people now on my mailing list, and I can say it's really helped me, because it lets me reach so many more people. It lets me reach all the people that I'm trying to reach whenever I post on social media or Instagram, but don't reach just because of the nature of those platforms. So I would say, have a mailing list, and then some other practical things. A lot of it you just figure out by trial and error. A lot of it is so situational. I'll give you one example. So, as you know, I play a few different genres, as I just did in this program, and I booked a gig in my hometown of Asheville, playing traditional Irish music with one project, and then I booked a separate gig a week later playing jazz with actually Christian House, who I mentioned earlier, who's an amazing jazz violinist. And we were going to do this cool. The gig was called Fiddle Meets Violin or something, and it was a jazz gig, but I was inspired by my fiddle background and his violin background. Anyway, the venue that booked the jazz gig found out about the Irish gig, and they were like, "We can't believe you did this. We're canceling the show." And
No.
I was like, "No, but it's a different genre. It's a different audience. The people that are going to go to this show aren't going to go to the other show." And
Or maybe they'll love you so much they'll go to the second show.
well, right, that's what I said. He says it doesn't matter. It's your name on the bill, and the gigs are a week apart. You're competing against yourself, and they were right, and
Oh.
so they canceled the show. And that was, at the time, I was like, what's the big deal? Like, they're different audiences and all this. But I learned a real hard lesson, learned it the hard way that day, that you never book a gig under your name in the same. You never book more than one gig under your name in the same town without checking with the venue first.
Mm.
Just don't do that. And so these are like little things you can only learn through experience. Maybe the people watching they're like, of course you shouldn't have done that, but I didn't know that. So
Okay. Well, let's make this our last question. Do you have any favorite fiddle camps that you would recommend for young musicians?
yeah, so I would say the Swananoa Gathering first and foremost. I mean, I'm biased, obviously, but it is a great camp, and I've taught it over 12 fiddle camps, not just even in the States, in France, in Brazil, Scotland. But I would say the Swananoa Gathering is special. A lot of it depends on what kind of experience you want. Each camp is very different. So in one way, in one sense, it's kind of like comparing apples and oranges, because, for example, like Creative Strings, which Christian House runs in Columbus,
Mm-hmm.
um, it's it's very much it's like open to all skill levels. Like there are professional classical musicians with degrees in classical music who participate in that camp. And one of his big angles is kind of like opening the ear of the specifically classical musician to other genres, specifically how to improvise, and how to play funk and things you may not have learned in conservatory. And so, there's these breakout groups, and the level of musicianship is very high. If you're looking for something, it can also be as easy as you want to make it, right? Like, not every single class is super intense. But Chris is an amazing teacher, so you'll get something out of it. Some camps are pretty low key, and people are just there to jam, And some camps like people are literally camping, in tents. But again, they're just there to jam. Whereas other camps, you're in a dorm, it's a little more formal, but the overall vibe is a little more formal. Maybe there's not as much jamming. So I would go to Fiddler magazine. They have a list of all the camps in the U.S. that's updated every year, and you can check out the individual sites. But having said that, the Sonono Gathering is
Just so you know, I put the link in the chat so
awesome.
that everyone can see. And I also found and put the link into Christian House's um, program as well. So,
Awesome. Cool.
well, I'd like to thank our audience for joining us tonight. And Finn, I'd like to thank you for a terrific performance and your enthusiasm and your energy in answering our audience's questions. And we really, really hope that once this pandemic is over, that we can have you for an in-person, in real life performance. One of the things that I'm going to do for our audience, if you all are interested in Finn Magill's music and you would like to learn more, look at the projects he's worked on, access some of the videos that he has made, or some of the albums that he's recorded. I am also putting this in the chat, his Bandcamp site, which is andrewfinnmagill.bandcamp.com. And that's a really great way that you can subscribe to some of his content or the things that he has produced over the course of his musical career so far. So, Finn, thank you again. And to our audience, we're so glad you were able to join us, and we hope you enjoyed the evening. We look forward to seeing you again, whether it's in this venue or on Randolph College's campus.
Sounds
So
great.
thank you all so much, and have a good night.